And I give a lot of credit to some of the CEOs out there and people who are making decisions to implement real wellness plans in their organization to change behavior that could decrease presenteeism, decrease absenteeism, and eventually drive down healthcare costs.
That is so important. And you're right. I mean, you give employees, you hang posters on walls, you give out leaflets, and you're not getting anywhere with that. But to be as a business owner, even if you have 2 or 3 employees, be cognizant of the fact that people are suffering from illnesses and things of that nature, and that there are ways to educate them.
And that's why we have Wellness at Work. Wellness at Work is to go into that organization and to teach. The intent of Wellness at Work is health education through teaching. The tagline of Wellness at Work is longevity. Okay, the key to longevity is through health education. It's the key. It's understanding. It's understanding what does the longevity model look like, even though it's all in God's hands. But as human beings, we have choices that we make every day, and our behavior will dictate how we feel, how we function, and how long we live. So when looking at that model, that's exactly right. How do we incorporate real wellness plans into our businesses as business owners? And it might be as simple as a 1-hour lunch and learn where you get that ball rolling. You might be as simple as taking a group of people out to an event and learning what is real stress management. How do we really drive down stress in the workplace? So these things are out there. Just like we do smoking cessation. I don't do it, but I know you have the smoking cessation classes out there. These are good things. These are things that have been incorporated and actually work. They actually show that there's physical evidence that they work, and I think that we all have to be very conscious of that.
It's funny because in small businesses we kind of are very conscious of it because I have an assistant in the office or a service tech in the company, and if one person is missing, that's a big hit on the company. For that day or that week or whatever. But some of these companies that have hundreds of employees, like you're saying, I know I walk into a lot of corporate clients and people are at their desk sniffling or sneezing or taking a break or whatever because they're just unhealthy and they don't feel well, but they still come to work because they want to get the pay, but they're still not productive. So that's a great point, Doc, and it's so important to get that information. We're here on Tandem Radio Live with Dr. James Proodian. You can check out his information at ProodianHealthcare.com and also connect to the link through TandemRadio.com, our website, just filled with powerful information, previously recorded shows, as well as general information from our sponsors, and just helpful notes. Scriptures are on there and other things. You can also communicate with us through TandemRadio.com. We'd love to hear from you. We're here every Saturday morning with the good news on business, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time till noon. Different topics every week, all kinds of exciting stuff coming up. And we're coming in, believe it or not, into our last segment of the hour. And Dr. Proodian's got some great tips for you on eating and health and some other things that I think you'll be real happy to hear about. So stay tuned. We got a lot more coming, especially for those of you who are interested in business. Well, welcome back to Tandem Radio Live. This is your host, Glenn Delakian, along with Dr. James Proodian from the Natural Healthcare Center. And we have so much more to squeeze into this last segment. But our scriptures for today, which are so relative and so important. First off, 1 Samuel 16:12. So he sent for him and had him brought in. And they're talking about David here, young David, before he was anointed. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. I'll tell you, health is so important. When you're healthy and you feel good, it just exudes from you, and it gives you that appearance of health, which people love to see. It's kind of a magnet. I know I was at an event last night, and I ended up talking to a lot of people. One of the photographers came over to me, and he said, what is it? How do you get the contact with all these people? I said, well, I just feel good about talking to people, and I'm confident in what I'm telling them. And he said, you know what? You just exude confidence in what you're doing, and it really does. When you feel good and you feel healthy, you just exude confidence, and that's so important, and God makes it so crystal clear here. I thought it just jumped out at me when I was reading 1 Samuel, and he talked about David. The first things he talked about was he was glowing with health, And Doc, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm glad that Dr. Proodian's here today because it ties right into this Proverbs 12:8. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. There's so much misinformation out there and so much crazy stuff. I mean, I was just chuckling with my wife the other day. We were sitting watching something, and they had one of those infomercials on. They were like a 1-minute commercial was more like an infomercial, and they were making these unbelievable claims about. I don't even want to get into it, but it was crazy. I said, "My wife, how do they legally allow this stuff?" And like you were talking about before, some of the foods they have on the market, how they legally allowed it. But Proverbs, the words of the reckless pierce like swords. but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Dr. James, I want to thank you because your tongue definitely has wisdom in it for sure. And so let's get back into some of the themes of what we were talking about today. I want to wrap up on a couple of important points and finish up with the eating tips, because I think people will be able to take a pen and pencil out and really get some good insight from you. Let's talk briefly about getting the word out and keeping the wisdom flowing. Proodian Press, right, is something you've been working on.
Well, I've done that over the years. NaturalHealthCareCenter.com is the website to our organization. Everything on the site is free. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I do on the site is there's a tab called Dr. Proodian's Press. I don't know how many articles I have there, Glenn, but that gives those goes out to the local newspapers down by me. But yeah, I write frequently. I send them out there into the clouds and see who anybody wants to publish them. And I'm going to be getting into some video stuff later this year. I've been asked to do that. But yeah, I think that health literacy being the key to longevity. Going back to that underlying tagline, health literacy, the key to longevity. And looking at what is literacy, we have to base it upon, again, science and design. What is the design? What is the science behind some of these crazy claims that are being made out there? And using what we have in research nowadays, what is the research in this field that can be dispensed to people so they can read it, they can understand it, and they can then, again, incorporate it and take action, taking the action to the proper type of research and education that we have, as opposed to just understanding it and moving on with our lives.
That's so important. The action is the key, and I'll tell you, I've heard people say, pain and pleasure stir people to action, and I don't know which one stirs them more. But
and it's funny you said pain. Like, just take a look at 80% of Americans, 80% will be disabled in their life 2 weeks because of back pain. So we know back pain is this massive epidemic. It's a massive thing. Everybody on the air right now, I'm sure everybody is experiencing some realm of back pain. And how, if you think about pain in general, how it makes us fatigued. Every day, if people have gnawing headaches and shoulder pain and back pain, it actually taps our energy supply. So what your point was about your physical appearance, being confident, it's very difficult to do when you're in a constant state or a chronic state of pain.
Right.
And a lot of that constant state or chronic state of pain is due to the way we're eating and the inflammation model, not just because we have arthritis or just because we have a disc injury. It also has to do with the nutritional aspect of our lives. So it's not as simple as just saying, I'm going to fix this thing physically. Let's fix it physically. Let's help it along nutritionally. And look at again, going back to the connected dots model. And that really is what the definition of health is bringing all of those components together.
And, it's not just the physical health either, right?
No.
It's the emotional, mental health as well.
That's why
that's a whole other thing we can get on for hours. But
one of the things I just tell my patients to stop doing, stop the scale in the mirror. Forget about the scale and forget about the mirror. Middle linebacker to Giants would be called clinically obese,
right,
but because they're made up of predominantly muscle. Muscle weighs more than fat. So let's get into body composition. Again, going back to design. We're made up of water, fat, muscle, right? Not just an air. So our body's made up of many elements, not just gross weight on the scale. So you take it apart literally and going into a body composition, but you have to know how to measure all that stuff.
And I know many times you just have to address both. And again, I don't want to go off on that tangent. I know you've referred many clients to my wife's practice, the 3keyscounseling.com, and there's a lot of emotional issues people suffer from and things of that nature as well. And sometimes that starts with the health issue. Maybe it starts with chronic pain somewhere and goes into an emotional issue, or sometimes vice versa. So there's a lot to consider there, and maybe we'll do a show on mental health in the near future as well, and have my wife on there who's a clinician. But it's been great stuff, and there's so much more to cover. Let's talk a little bit more about the eating tips. Let's get into specifically, I know you and I had a great conversation last time about how there's certain things we're designed to eat and designed to do. So let's take a few minutes to touch on that.
Well, sure. The health literacy, the key to longevity. Let's take a look at design. Just some really simple things that I'll come off of my PowerPoint slides that I've had for years. Eat foods that rot or spoil, just eat them before they do. Right? And kind of digest that, right?
So
eat foods that rot or spoil, just eat them before they do. So, stuff needs to be refrigerated. It's good that foods are kept refrigerated.
Yeah.
Oil is meant to be in a refrigerator. oil is a product, when you think about making oil, that should be in a dark sealed container because it's light sensitive. So you think about, I'm not going to name the product, but everybody knows the kind of products that have clear containers, and that's because that oil has been boiled to like 400 degrees, and everything inside of it has been killed so it can sit on the shelf forever.